You were never really my daughter, Leah. The words fell from his mouth like stones breaking glass. I remember the way the room spun, the old clock ticking on the mantel, my grandmother's photograph watching from the wall, and the taste of iron in my mouth as I tried to breathe. I'd spent 24 years believing my father was my protector, my anchor. But that night he looked at me like a stranger. He told me the truth, or what he wanted me to believe, that I wasn't his blood, that my mother had lied, and that Grandma's will was meant for real family only. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just whispered one sentence that made him flinch. Then let's see what real family means when secrets start talking. I used to think betrayal came with shouting. But sometimes it's quiet, like the slow crack of glass before it shatters. That night, the rain was soft against the windows. We were sitting in my father's study. Me, him, and his lawyer, Mr. Trent. The air smelled like old wood and whiskey. Grandma had passed 6 months earlier, and the lawyer had come with updates about her estate. I wasn't expecting much. Grandma had always said, "It's not about the money, Leah. It's about remembering whose family." But then Dad cleared his throat, eyes cold. "There's something I need to tell you," he said. I smiled nervously. "What is it?" He didn't look at me when he said it. "You were never really my daughter." The words felt like thunder, silent, then deafening. For a second I thought he was joking. But the way Mr. Trent adjusted his tie told me otherwise. What are you talking about?" I stammered. Dad leaned back. "Your mother, before she died, she told me the truth. You're not mine by blood. I've kept it quiet out of respect, but now that your grandmother's estate is being divided, it needs to be clear. The will specifies direct descendants only." I blinked, trying to process. "Direct descendants?" He nodded. "Meaning me and my son." My half-brother, Eric, smirked from the corner. I hadn't even noticed he was there until that moment. "So that's why you invited me tonight," I said quietly. "To tell me I don't count." Dad sighed, as if I was being difficult. "It's not personal, Leah. It's legal. You'll still receive something small, for courtesy." Courtesy? Like I was some charity case. I stood slowly, my hands trembling. "You're saying Mom lied to you her whole life? That she raised me under your roof, called you her husband, and you just never noticed?" His jaw tightened. "Don't start. The documents are clear. The lawyer verified everything." Mr. Trent opened a folder and slid a paper toward me. A printed DNA report. My name, my father's, and one cruel line in bold. "No biological relation detected." I wanted to scream, but something deep inside told me not to give them that satisfaction. I just whispered, "Grandma would never have allowed this." Dad's eyes flickered, just for a moment. And that's when I saw it, guilt. He looked away. She didn't know the truth. But I remembered Grandma's words from years ago, the way she'd squeezed my hand and said, "Never doubt what you are to me, Leah. Never." That night, I left the house without another word. The DNA paper burned in my hand like a wound I couldn't see. But when I got home and opened the drawer where I kept Grandma's letters, one envelope stood out. Older, sealed, my name written in her careful handwriting. "To Leah. For when the truth tries to hurt you." I stared at the envelope for almost an hour before I dared to open it. The paper was yellowed at the edges, the ink slightly faded, but the handwriting was still unmistakably hers. Elegant, calm, certain. "For when the truth tries to hurt you." She had written those words years before, and now they felt like they were breathing inside my chest. My fingers trembled as I tore it open. Inside was a single sheet folded twice, smelling faintly of lavender. Grandma's favorite. "My dearest Leah, if you are reading this, someone has tried to make you question who you are. Do not believe everything written on paper. I once trusted someone who twisted ink into lies for the sake of money. The truth is in the chest upstairs, the one I told your father never to touch. It holds proof of what I couldn't say out loud while I was alive. Remember this. Love makes family. But sometimes love must defend itself with evidence." "Grandma." My heart thudded. The attic chest. I knew exactly which one she meant. The heavy oak trunk that sat beneath the window in her old bedroom. She'd always said it held family keepsakes, and I'd never thought twice about it. The next morning I drove back to the house. It was still quiet, cold, and empty. My father hadn't lived there since the funeral. Dust coated everything, sunlight falling through half-drawn curtains like pale ribbons. As I climbed the creaky attic stairs, memories rushed back. The smell of cinnamon cookies, Grandma's humming voice, the sound of her knitting needles tapping like a heartbeat. The trunk was there, just as I remembered. Heavy. But Grandma had been clever. She hid keys in places that told stories. I knelt by the bookshelf where she used to keep her Bible. Inside its pages, I found a small brass key, pressed flat between Psalms 37 verse 6. He will make your righteousness shine like the dawn. The lock clicked open. Inside were letters, documents, photographs, and a small wooden box tied with red ribbon. On top, a note in her handwriting. For Leah's eyes only. Open the box. Inside were two things. A photograph of my parents at their wedding and a hospital bracelet with my name. Baby Leah, Carter Family Hospital. But then I saw another document tucked underneath. A birth certificate. My birth certificate. And it listed Thomas Avery Carter as my father. That was my father's full legal name. The same man who told me I wasn't his child. My head spun. Either he was lying, or someone had changed the records later. I scanned the paper closer. At the bottom was a signature. My grandmother's, along with a small handwritten note. Keep this safe, Leah. I fear the day he values money more than truth. Tears blurred my vision. She knew. She'd known he would do this. Suddenly, footsteps echoed downstairs. Froze. Leah. It was my father's voice. Why are you here? My hands flew to the papers. I shoved them back into the chest and turned to face the stairs. I came to clean up, I said, trying to sound calm. He stepped closer, eyes narrowing. That chest is off limits. I smiled faintly. You always did hate sharing secrets, didn't you? He stared at me, too long, too sharp. Whatever you think you're doing, stop. The will is already filed. I met his gaze. Maybe. But Grandma's words are stronger than your paperwork. For the first time since that awful night, I saw something flicker behind his coldness, fear. And in that moment, I realized he wasn't protecting the truth. He was hiding from it. After that night in the attic, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Grandma's words. Do not believe everything written on paper. But my father's cold voice haunted me too. You were never really my daughter. I needed proof, not from him, not from his lawyer, but from science itself. The next morning I ordered a DNA test online. Quietly. I sent my sample using a private lab, one that promised complete confidentiality. For days I went through the motions, working, eating, pretending everything was normal. But every phone buzz made my heart race. Then, on the fourth day, my father showed up at my apartment. He stood in the doorway, holding a thick folder. I know what you're doing, he said flatly. What am I doing? I asked, feigning ignorance. You think you're going to prove something. You'll only embarrass yourself. He tossed the folder onto my coffee table. Here, read it. I already took a DNA test for both of us. My throat tightened. Without my consent. He smirked. You left a hairbrush at home. I sent it in. The results came this morning. I stared at the envelope. It was from a well-known genetic testing company. Glossy, official-looking. Inside, the document looked legitimate, complete with barcodes and seals. Probability of biological relationship. 0%. I felt my stomach drop. It looked real. Too real. I told you, he said quietly, almost kindly. You're not mine. Let this go before you humiliate yourself further. He left without another word, leaving the door open behind him. But something about the letter bothered me. The company's name was slightly misspelled, one missing letter in the logo. It wasn't real. That night I called the private lab I'd used. Miss Carter, the woman said, your results will be ready in 48 hours. Would you like them emailed or delivered by hand? By hand, I whispered. Please. 2 days later, a courier arrived with a sealed envelope. My hand shook as I tore it open. Probability of biological relationship: 99.97%. My knees gave out. He'd lied. He'd faked evidence to erase me. That night, I sat in the dark staring at both documents, the real and the fake. And I realized something chilling. He wasn't just trying to disinherit me. He was trying to rewrite history. The family lawyer's office smelled of paper and old secrets. Mr. Dalton had handled Grandma's estate for decades. When I told him what had happened, he frowned deeply. Your grandmother was meticulous, he said. She never changed her will lightly. I handed him the real DNA results, along with the forged one my father had fabricated. He studied them both carefully. This fake is professional. He used a dummy firm. These are serious allegations, Leah. I'm not accusing, I said. I'm proving. He nodded slowly. Let's see what we can find. He pulled out Grandma's file from his cabinet, thick, worn and tied with twine. Inside were multiple drafts of her will, each signed and notarized. The latest version, the one my father had used, looked newer, printed on fresher paper with one key change. My name had been removed as an heir. Mr. Dalton compared the signatures. Something's off here. The last one doesn't match her handwriting. He pulled out an older draft dated 6 months before Grandma's death. That version listed me as the primary heir. My throat tightened. So she meant for me to inherit everything. Mr. Dalton nodded. Until someone changed it. We looked at each other. Neither of us needed to say who. He leaned forward. Leah, do you still have that letter she wrote you? I handed it to him. He read it silently, his eyes narrowing. This line, evidence in the chest. It's practically a coded message for me. She must have known he'd try something. My pulse quickened. Can we contest the will? He smiled faintly. We can destroy it. That afternoon we began preparing. He filed an emergency injunction to freeze the estate distribution until the handwriting and document authenticity could be reviewed. When the notice reached my father the next morning, all hell broke loose. He stormed into my apartment, face red with rage. You're making a mistake, Leah. You think you can beat me. I stood my ground. No. I'm just making sure Grandma's voice is heard. He glared at me, then laughed bitterly. You have no idea what you've started. But I did. For the first time in my life I felt power, not from anger but from truth. A week later Mr. Dalton called. Leah, you need to come in. Now. His tone was grim. When I arrived he slid a file across the table. Inside were loan applications. 4 of them. All taken under my name. My signature. My ID. Forged perfectly. Felt sick. How much? Over 200,000, he said softly. Secured against the estate's value. If we hadn't frozen the assets, you'd already owe it. My hand shook. He was planning to frame me. Yes, Mr. Dalton said. And I think he's done it before. There are discrepancies in past transfers too. That night I confronted him. He didn't deny it. You think money comes easy, he shouted. I built this family. Your grandmother gave you everything and left me scraps. I had to take what should have been mine. I stared at him. You didn't take it, Dad. You stole it. He stepped closer, his voice low. You'll regret this. I didn't flinch. No, you will. The next morning, I gathered every document and handed them to the authorities. Fraud, forgery, theft, all of it. Mr. Dalton filed additional motions for a criminal inquiry. And while my father tried to intimidate me with calls, I didn't answer. Because Grandma had taught me something he never understood. Silence can be more powerful than any threat. The courthouse was packed. Reporters, lawyers, distant relatives. Everyone who once smiled politely at family dinners now came to watch the show. Dad sat across from me, his expression unreadable. Beside him, his attorney whispered frantically. Mr. Dalton leaned toward me. "Stay calm, Leah. Facts win, not emotions." The judge began. "We are here to determine the authenticity of the will and allegations of financial fraud." Dad's lawyer started strong, painting him as a loving father misled by paperwork. But when my turn came, Mr. Dalton stood and calmly unfolded Grandma's real will, the original notarized version with her authentic signature. The courtroom buzzed. Then he presented the DNA results, the genuine ones. My father's lawyer objected. The judge overruled. Mr. Dalton's voice cut through the silence. "This document, Your Honor, was forged. And the defendant's attempt to falsify DNA evidence shows premeditation." Dad slammed his hand on the table. "It was my money. My mother owed me everything." The judge frowned. "Mr. Carter, enough." But he kept going, voice cracking. "She never cared about me. She only cared about her." He pointed at me like I was the villain. For a long moment no one spoke. Then the judge said quietly, "What I see is a daughter protecting her grandmother's legacy, and a father destroying it." The ruling was swift. The fake will voided. The estate returned to its rightful heir, me. The fraud charges under investigation. As the bailiff escorted him out, he looked back once. Not with anger, not even hatred, but shame. That night I stood outside Grandma's house again, the air still and full of memories. I whispered, "You were right, Grandma. Love does make family." And somewhere deep inside, I could almost hear her voice. "And truth keeps it together." A month after the hearing, the world went quiet. For the first time in months, my phone didn't buzz with threats, court updates, or pitying messages. The lawyers stopped calling. The reporters moved on. And my father, the man who once controlled every room he walked into, was now just another inmate number on a file. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt hollow. Justice is heavy when it comes wrapped in blood. One morning, as I sorted through mail at Grandma's house, a brown envelope caught my eye. The handwriting was unmistakable, sharp, precise, and painfully familiar. The return address, Carter State Penitentiary. My stomach twisted. I tore it open slowly, each word feeling like a wound reopening. "Leah, if you're reading this, you've won. Congratulations. You have the house, the money, the name. Everything you think was stolen. I won't ask for forgiveness. You were right about me, about everything. But there's something you don't know. Something your grandmother never told either of us. The day your mother died, she left a letter for me. I didn't open it for years. Not until after the trial. She confessed that she had been unfaithful once, years before you were born. But she never named who. She said she wasn't sure who your biological father was, but that she loved me enough to raise you as mine. So, technically I wasn't lying when I said you might not be my daughter. But I twisted that truth into a weapon. I made it poison. For that, I deserve every punishment. Thomas. I read the letter 3 times. Then I folded it carefully, placed it back in the envelope, and set it on the table beside Grandma's photo. He wanted me to hate him less. But all it did was make me realize how much hate had already destroyed him. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about my mother, her warmth, her laugh, the way she'd smooth my hair and whisper, "You're my miracle, Leah." Maybe the truth was complicated. Maybe blood really didn't define family after all. Still, I needed to know the whole story. The next morning, I drove to the city hospital where I was born. Carter Family Hospital, the name from the bracelet I'd found in Grandma's chest. The receptionist helped me access my mother's old records. When the file came up, I froze. Under father's name, it said, Thomas Avery Carter. No correction. No amendment. No alternate record. She'd never changed it. Which meant she'd chosen him. No matter what doubts she had, she'd made her choice. He was my father not because of DNA but because of responsibility. And he'd failed that responsibility the moment greed replaced love. I walked out of that hospital with a strange peace. Not closure, just acceptance. Because I realized something. You can't rewrite the past, but you can decide what kind of future carries your name. The lawyer called the estate settled, but Grandma's house still felt alive, like it was holding its breath. The creak of the floors, the faint smell of lavender and oak, every inch carried her presence. I spent weeks organizing papers, letters, and photo albums. It was almost meditative. Then one afternoon, as I was dusting the old piano in the living room, I noticed something odd. A small metal hinge beneath the keyboard, almost invisible under decades of polish. Curious, I pressed it. The panel loosened, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside was a thin envelope sealed with wax, the same rose-shaped stamp Grandma used for her personal letters. My name again, written in her elegant hand. I sat down on the piano bench and opened it carefully. My sweet Leah, if you are reading this, the truth has reached you in painful ways. I tried to prepare you, but some lessons only life can teach. You were always meant to find this, not because of what it contains but because of what it means. Enclosed is a deed to the coastal property I never told anyone about. I bought it in your name years ago, using money that I kept separate from the estate. Your father doesn't know it exists. I wanted you to have something that couldn't be touched by greed or law. A place that's only yours. Go there when you're ready. It will remind you that peace is stronger than revenge. Grandma. Inside was a deed, Blue Harbor Estate, a small seaside cottage 2 hours north. My throat tightened. Even from beyond the grave, Grandma had protected me, not with money but with foresight. I drove there that weekend. The cottage sat at the edge of a cliff, overlooking endless blue water. The sea breeze carried salt and serenity. Inside, the walls were painted soft white, the furniture minimal. But one photograph hung by the window, a picture of me at 5 years old, standing beside Grandma, my hands covered in sand. She must have hung it herself. For the first time since her death, I cried. Not out of anger. Out of gratitude. Because everything she'd done, the letters, the secrets, the foresight, wasn't just about inheritance. It was about identity. She'd known I'd lose faith. And she'd built a trail of truth for me to follow home. I thought the story had ended. That peace had finally replaced pain. But stories like mine don't fade quietly. They echo. It was early spring when Mr. Trent, my father's old lawyer, arrived at the seaside cottage. He looked older, thinner, carrying a folder under his arm. "Miss Carter," he said softly. "I know I'm probably the last person you want to see." I let him in. "What do you want, Mr. Trent?" He set the folder on the table. "Your father asked me to deliver this. He wrote it before the sentencing." I hesitated, then opened it. Inside were 2 documents, a handwritten confession and a small key. The letter was long, shaky, full of regret. "Leah, I know the truth is all you ever wanted. So here it is. I forged Grandma's will, yes. But not because I wanted all her money. Not at first. I was drowning. I'd made terrible investments. I was being blackmailed by a business partner who threatened to expose the loans I took in your name. He forged your signature first. I just covered it up. The key enclosed belongs to a safe deposit box at Ridgeway Bank. Everything's inside. Proof of his involvement, records of the payments, and the original fake DNA report he sent me to use against you. His name is Anthony Miles. When this reaches you, do what you think is right. I won't ask for mercy. Just truth." "Dad." I sat frozen. All this time, I thought the lies began and ended with him. But there was another man behind it all. The next day, I went to Ridgeway Bank. The manager opened the deposit box under court authorization. Inside were stacks of documents, invoices, transfers, even messages between Dad and this Anthony Miles. He had blackmailed my father for years, threatening to leak his debts, ruin his reputation, and frame him for fraud. Dad had been desperate. He'd traded his dignity for silence. And when it wasn't enough, he'd turned against me. That night, I sat by the sea, holding the letter in my hands. For the first time, I didn't feel anger toward him, only sorrow. He had chosen greed over truth, but beneath that greed was fear. And fear had turned him into the very thing he once swore to protect me from. Prison smelled like disinfectant and regret. When I walked into the visitation room, he was already there. Thinner, grayer, his eyes hollow. He looked up slowly. "Leah." I sat down across from him. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Finally, he whispered, "You found the box." "I did." He nodded weakly. "I tried to fix it, you know. But by the time I realized what I'd done, it was too late." I studied him carefully. "You could have told me the truth, Dad. You could have trusted me." His voice cracked. "I was ashamed. Every time I looked at you, I saw the good in your mother, and the worst in myself." I swallowed hard. "You almost destroyed me." He nodded. "I know." Then, surprisingly, he smiled, not proudly but peacefully. "But you didn't break, Leah. You became everything your grandmother hoped you'd be." We sat in silence, the kind that doesn't need words. Before I left, he handed me something, a small, folded paper. It was a drawing I'd made when I was 5, stick figures of me, Mom, Dad, and Grandma holding hands under a big sun. On the back he'd written, "Forgive the man I was. Remember the father I tried to be." When I walked out, I didn't look back. Some goodbyes are too sacred for second glances. Months later, I turned Grandma's house into the Carter Foundation, a shelter for young women who'd been betrayed or disowned by family. The walls that once held pain now held purpose. I hung Grandma's favorite quote by the entrance. "Family isn't inherited, it's chosen with love." As I locked up that night, the sea breeze carried the faintest whisper, as if both she and my mother were still there, watching proud. And I finally understood the lesson hidden in all the heartbreak. Truth doesn't destroy families. Lies do. And once you face the truth without fear, no one can ever disinherit you from your own worth again. He tried to cut me out of my family for money. Instead, I built a legacy in their name, one he'll never touch. Speech balloon. What would you do if your parent tried to erase you for greed? Red heart, like, thought balloon, comment. And bell, subscribe for more cinematic diary style stories like Leah's.